Good morning. Please join me in Gasho for a reading from the collected works of Shinran. Mahasattva Nagarjuna appeared in the world and distinguished the paths of the difficult and easy practice. Thus he leads us who are wandering in transmigration to board the ship of the universal vow. Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda Butsu, Namanda Butsu, Namanda. Thank you so much for joining us for the campfire service this morning. I will always be grateful to the campfire program because that is what brought me initially to the temple. When my daughter was 5 years old, she joined a campfire group, and now, 17 years later, here I am giving the campfire Dharma talk. Let me start by saying I want to apologize if my talk zigzags a little bit in different directions. While writing it, I ran into a bunch of roadblocks and had to find some detours in order to make things make sense. This talk started with a conversation that I had last summer with one of our members at the Hiroshima to Hope event. We were talking about her recent retirement from the UW, and I was asking her how things were going and how she enjoys her newfound free time. She answered me in a way that I did not expect. She said that she doesn't miss working so much. What she really misses is taking the bus. At the time, I was both surprised and delighted because one of my favorite things in life is taking the bus as well. We talked for a while about how relaxing it is just to sit there and be transported from one place to another without any effort. Nothing is expected of you except to pay when you get on and pull the cord when you want to get off. I continued to think about our conversation afterwards, and it occurred to me that the difference between solo commuting and taking the bus would be a great topic for a Dharma talk. I could easily use it to explain the teaching of the easy path versus the path of the sages, or the difficult path. For those of you who aren't familiar with this teaching, it was first thought up in China by Tan Wan, who is one of our Pure Land masters. He recognized that not all humans are cut out for difficult practices like intense meditation, scholarship, or asceticism. Buddhism needed a way for the ordinary person like you and I to participate. So he came up with the concept of the easy path, which is basically to recite the Buddha's name, or Namu Amida Butsu. And we use this as a way to access the infinite in our everyday lives. In this path, we call to Amida, and Amida does the work of liberating us from our confusion. So in my talk, I was going to compare this easy path with taking the bus. On the bus, Amida does the driving. Driving solo is a different story, as all of you know. This is the path of the sages. We have to navigate independently with things like traffic, red lights, road rage, and squeezing into tiny parking spots. This is a rigorous path compared with what is experienced by the bus rider. So I thought I had my Dharma talk all sewed up when a little voice in my head brought up this question. If taking the bus is such a blissful way to go, why doesn't everyone love it as much as I and my fellow congregationists do? Then I remembered what my daughter once said to me when she was a teenager. When I asked her to take the bus, she said, "Mom, why would I want to take the bus with a bunch of randos?" For those of you who are over the age of 30, randos are basically people that we do not know. I thought about it, and I couldn't resolve the issue of the randos and gave up on my idea for my talk. How could I convince all of you to get on that Mita bus if you don't want to sit next to your fellow bus riders? What has to happen for randos to become what Shinran Shonin called fellow travelers? At what point does our bus become a sangha? At what point do they become we? I was still puzzling over these questions when about a month later, the answer suddenly came to me at the Department of Motor Vehicles. I arrived there with my son to register his new used car at 4:30 p.m., just 30 minutes before they closed, and it was packed with as wide an assortment of people as you can imagine. I was not in a good mood. When I first arrived, I grabbed my number and looked around suspiciously. How long would each person's transaction take? I was 20 numbers away from being called. One family seemed to have an enormous stack of papers. It was dog eat dog in there, and things didn't go well from the start. It took 10 minutes for them to call the first number. I was mentally calculating that we would be there until 10 p.m. at the rate that things were going. I had the evil thought that perhaps someone who stepped out for a smoke would miss their turn. As the clock inched toward 5 p.m., I began to give up hope. And then something magical happened. A guy stepped from behind the counter and told us that everyone in the waiting room would be served that day, but not to let anyone new come in. They would have to wait until tomorrow. All of a sudden, the whole atmosphere changed. It was us against them. We were no longer randos. We were the people who had arrived at the DMV before 5 p.m. that day. And I suddenly felt a sense of camaraderie and shared destiny with everyone in the room. One person piped up that a lady had just stepped out to move her car. She was one of us, and everyone in the room nodded to indicate that we would keep a lookout for her and let her in, but nobody else would come through that door. We had become fellow travelers. We were a Sangha. As I left the DMV, I was elated to think that I had found my way around the randos problem. My answer was that we just have to find some sense of commonality that we all share in order to want to sit together as fellow travelers on the Amida bus. However, this solution only led me to more questions. What about our Sangha at the Seattle Betsuine? This question really hit home. Those of us who have been around for a while sit together each Sunday. Newcomers come and go. Sometimes they stay. Usually we stay within our little groups and gravitate towards those that we know. This is probably normal for a big group, but does our temple really have a sense of shared destiny? Do we have a shared concept of our common destination? I was able to resolve this final question at the Eitaikyo Dharma exchange. After service, we were asked to gather in small groups with a little piece of paper, and everyone had to talk about why they had come that day. The people in my group identified themselves in various ways. They were campfire, BWA, book study, Taiko, the building committee, etc. But as our group started to share their thoughts, it became obvious that each and every one of them had a deep and abiding love for our temple, and not for the same reasons. For some of us, it might have been the beauty of Reverend Kusunoki's chanting or hearing the Buddhist teachings. For others, it might be the delicious mochi or the enormous rice cookers or the temple and all its winding hallways leading to secret places, or the beat of the taiko drummers, or cuddling babies at the Dharma school. We come here for different reasons, but what makes us a Sangha is the love in our hearts for the Seattle Betsuine Buddhist temple or church, or whatever we call it. We've been through a lot together over the past 4 years, first with COVID and then the arson fire. and now the chaos that seems to be spreading throughout our country these past few months. We've gone through these struggles together and will inevitably go through many more. Having a shared concept of who we are will give us the strength to deal with the uncertainties that lie ahead. We are not just a selection of random individuals. We are a Sangha, and we are not driving solo. I do believe that the three treasures of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha will get us through if we listen and remember to let them in. Remember that we are all on the bus heading toward the Pure Land and simply need to pull the cord when we get there. Please join me in Gasho. Mahasattva Nagarjuna appeared in the world and distinguished the paths of the difficult and easy practice. Thus he leads us, who are wandering in transmigration, to board the ship of the universal vow. Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda Butsu, Namanda, Namanda Butsu. Thank you for joining the Dharma talk today.